is going on here? Why are you in my house? You gave birth for my husband. Oh my God, I can't take this betrayal.
My name is Vera, and the day I came back from abroad, I died inside. Not from sickness, not from accident, but from the two people I trusted with my very life. Let me start from the beginning, because if I tell you the end first, you will not believe me. You will say, no, this cannot happen. Not a sister, not a husband. But I am standing here telling you it happened to me. Every single word. 3 years. 3 years I spent in the United Kingdom, working double shifts at a care home, scrubbing old people's bodies in the early hours of the morning when the cold beat into my fingers like broken glass. I did not complain. I did not rest. Every pound I earned, I converted to naira and sent home to Johnson, my husband, for his business. That was what he called it, business. Johnson had come into my life like sunrise, tall, easy with his smile, always knowing the right thing to say. My mother loved him. My aunties loved him. Even my younger sister Anita had pulled me aside one Sunday afternoon and said, Vera, this man is a good one. Hold him tight. I held him tight. God knows I held him tight. When the opportunity to travel came through an agency, it was Johnson himself who sat me down and said, Baby, go, build something for us. I will hold things down here. We have a future to build. He said it with such calm, such certainty that I wept and called him a gift from God. Anita echoed him, Sister, go. Don't let fear steal your destiny. So I went. I wired money every month without fail. 50,000 naira, 80,000 naira, sometimes 120 when I picked up extra shifts. Johnson would send me voice notes. Thank you, baby. The business is growing. I'm proud of you. Anita would send me photos, smiling, dressed well. Your husband is doing well, sister. Don't worry. I should have felt something, a pull, a shadow. But love is a blindfold stitched with thread that doesn't fray easily. The day my flight landed in Lagos, I did not tell Johnson I was coming. I wanted to surprise him. I had rehearsed the moment in my head 100 times on the plane. I would knock on the door. He would open it, and his eyes would fill with the kind of joy that makes time stop. I had packed new clothes for him, a wristwatch, perfume from duty free. I had gifts for Anita too. I took a taxi from the airport. When I turned into our street, the compound looked different. Flowers by the gate, new curtains in the window, a child's plastic toy on the veranda. I thought, Johnson has been keeping things neat. He must be expecting company. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. A woman's perfume, thick and sweet, the kind that clings to fabric and walls. Then I heard laughter from the kitchen, high-pitched, familiar laughter. Anita's laughter. I stood in my own living room and looked around. There were photos on the wall, Johnson and Anita smiling, holding a baby. A baby. My sister's handbag, the brown one I had sent her money to buy, sat on my couch like it owned the place. On the dining table, 2 plates, 2 cups, a baby's feeding bottle. My luggage was still in my hand when Anita walked out of the kitchen in a wrapper, holding a small child on her hip. She froze when she saw me. The child turned to look at me with Johnson's exact eyes. For 7 seconds, nobody moved. Then Johnson appeared behind her. He did not run to me. He did not reach for me. He stood there, and the look on his face was not guilt, it was calculation, like a man deciding what story to tell. That was when my body understood what my mind was still refusing to accept. I opened my mouth, and what came out was not a scream. It was not even words. It was a sound I had never made in my life before, low, hollow, the sound of a woman watching her whole world fold like paper in the rain. If you have ever been betrayed by the 2 people you loved most in the world, You will know that sound. You will know exactly what I mean. They begged me that night. Anita fell to the floor, my own floor. The tiles I had chosen. The house I had paid the rent on for 3 years. And she wept and held my ankles. Sister, I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. The baby was crying from the bedroom. Johnson stood by the wall with his hands clasped in front of him like a man in church, asking for mercy he did not deserve. I did not speak. I sat down on my own couch and stared at the wall. You want to know what the worst part was? It was not the betrayal itself. I would come to understand the full weight of that later. The worst part that night was how familiar everything looked. My curtains, my wall clock, the throw pillows I had ordered online from my lunch break in the UK, imagining how they would look when I finally came home to rest. Everything I had worked for, every tired morning, every skipped meal, every lonely night calling Johnson from a cold bedsit had built this, a home for my husband and my sister, a nest for their baby. It was Johnson who finally spoke. He sat across from me with the face of a man who had rehearsed his lines. He said the affair started by accident. He said he had tried to stop it. He said he loved me, but things happened. Things happened, like a flood, like weather, like it was nobody's fault. I looked at him. How old is the child? A pause. 1 year, 3 months. So while I was on my knees washing old people at 2 a.m, sending money, praying, missing him, they had already had a child together, already built a life. The money I sent was what furnished the life they built inside mine. The next day, my mother called, then my aunties, then my father's eldest brother. One by one, like a rehearsed chorus. Vera, forgive. Family is family. The child is innocent. Let it go. My mother said, Anita made a mistake, but she is still your blood. Mistake. 3 years of deliberate deception, and they called it a mistake. Here is what none of them knew. What I had begun to piece together in the silence of that first terrible night. Anita had met Johnson first. It came out in fragments, a detail Johnson let slip, an old message I found on the house tablet that nobody had thought to clear. Johnson had met Anita at a friend's party, long before he and I were introduced. He had liked her, Anita had wanted him, but Johnson had met me, and something in him had shifted. He chose me. He came after me. Anita had smiled at our wedding, had danced, had bought us a gift, but inside she had never let it go. And when Johnson and I hit a rough patch in our 2nd year of marriage, financial pressure, stress, the kind of grinding tension that comes when a couple is struggling, Anita moved in, slowly, offering help, cooking, being present, letting her perfume settle into the curtains, letting herself become indispensable. It was not an accident. It was a harvest. She had planted something the day she smiled at our wedding, and she had been watering it quietly ever since. The trip abroad, the encouragement to go, the sister don't let fear steal your destiny, that was not love. That was clearing the path. I sat with this knowledge for 2 days, and on the 3rd day, I made a decision that I told no one. I would forgive them. Publicly, loudly, with hugs and tears and words that sounded like grace. But in private, I would burn everything down to the last nail. I called my mother. Mama, I have prayed about it. I am ready to forgive. You could hear the relief collapse through the phone line. My mother began to thank God audibly right there on the call. She called Anita. She called Johnson. She organized a family meeting at her house the following Saturday, where I sat across from my sister and my husband and spoke words of forgiveness so clean, so quiet, so convincing that Anita wept and pressed her forehead to my hand. Johnson shook. He actually shook. He said he would spend the rest of his life making it up to me. I smiled at him. I said, let's just move forward. I watched them relax. I watched the tension leave Johnson's shoulders. I watched Anita's eyes go from guilty to grateful to, within 2 weeks, almost comfortable again. She started calling me sister the way she used to, casually, warmly, like we had simply had a quarrel over a borrowed dress. That comfort was my greatest weapon. See, when people believe they are forgiven, they stop watching, they stop checking, they go back to living as though the ground beneath them is solid. I had spent years abroad working in care, and in that work I had learnt one thing. The most important decisions are made in silence, not in noise. So, I was silent. I moved back into a rented room nearby. I told them I needed space while I, quote, healed. They understood. They gave me space. Meanwhile, I began to make calls. The first call was to the bank. 3 years of sending money, and I had never once been added as a signatory to the account Johnson used for the, quote, business. But I had receipts. Every transfer, every amount, every date. A lawyer friend in Lagos helped me understand what I could and could not do. What I could do was enough. The house we lived in, our marital home, was in my name. I had paid the 3-year rent upfront from my own savings. The receipt was in my documents. The agreement was in my name. Johnson had never renewed anything. He had simply kept living there on my foundation, building his alternate life. I renewed the tenancy quietly in my name only. I moved the originals to a secure location. The second thing I did was visit the shop. Johnson's, quote, business, a phone accessory shop, had been registered with my money. I had found the original business registration documents in a file I retrieved from the house. My name was not on the registration, but the startup capital transfer was provably mine. Another conversation with my lawyer. Then I did something that people would only understand if they have ever been economically bled dry by someone they loved. I opened a new account in a bank Johnson had no knowledge of, and I started redirecting, quietly, legally. The salary from my UK employer was still running. I had extended my contract remotely. Every naira equivalent went into the new account. Every asset I had funded, I began to document with the precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I visited them every Sunday. I brought food. I played with the baby, a little boy named Chukwuemeka, who had done nothing wrong and deserved none of this. I held him. I bounced him on my knee. Anita watched me and called me the bigger person. If only she knew what the bigger person was doing on Monday mornings. 3 months passed. Johnson began to talk about the future. He said he wanted to properly, quote, settle things, to legally formalize that he and Anita were together since Vera had, quote, graciously moved on. He even hinted at wanting me to relinquish my claim on the house so they could raise their child there properly. He said it gently. He said it like he was asking for a small favor. I looked at him across the table and I smiled, and somewhere inside me, a door closed forever. I said, let me think about it. I had already. It happened on a Thursday. I chose Thursday because it was a working day. Johnson would be at the shop, the baby would be at my mother's. Anita had started dropping him there on weekday mornings. Anita herself had told me she was attending a friend's introduction ceremony in Enugu that weekend. She would leave Wednesday evening. She would not return until Sunday. I had 4 days. The movers came at 7 in the morning. 3 men, efficient, professional, no questions. Everything that was mine, and I had documented everything that was mine, down to the standing fan I had bought the month before I traveled, came out of that house with quiet, organized speed. The kitchen appliances I had bought online and shipped, the bed, the wardrobe, the television, the small generator, all receipts, all documented. By 11 a.m., the house was a shell. The furniture that remained was what Johnson had purchased himself, which was almost nothing. A plastic chair, a small table he had bought from a roadside seller. The walls were bare where my photos had been. The kitchen had only what he had contributed, which was a kettle and 2 enameled plates. At noon, I walked through the empty rooms one final time. I did not cry. I had cried enough across 3 years of cold UK mornings. I had cried enough the night I came home and found my life rearranged. I was done with tears. I locked the door, kept the key, and left. The next morning, I contacted the property owner directly. I had the original tenancy agreement. I exercised my right not to renew on Johnson's behalf. I was legally within my rights. The tenancy was in my name. I was the named tenant and it expired in 6 weeks. The property owner was understanding. He was in fact relieved because Johnson had been asking him for a reduced rate and had been paying late. I also froze what I could. The business account had a joint element, a secondary account linked to my original seed transfer, which my lawyer had flagged. After filing the necessary paperwork, that access was severed. I did not call Johnson. I did not call Anita. I called no one. On Saturday evening, Johnson returned to the house. I know what happened next because he called me 47 times between 6 p.m. and midnight. I did not pick up. Then he called my mother. Then Anita, panicking, cut her trip short and drove back from Enugu. They arrived at the house together and they found walls. My mother called me, her voice cracking. "Vera, what have you done? Have you lost your mind? There is a child involved, a baby." I sat in my new apartment, small, clean, mine, paid from money I had saved specifically for this purpose. And I listened to her voice, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of someone who has given up. The peace of someone who has finally, at great cost, chosen themselves. I did not respond to my mother. I did not respond to any of them. My phone showed 47 missed calls from Johnson, 19 from Anita, 11 from my mother, 7 from my uncle. I turned it face down on the table, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. Outside, Lagos moved on as it always does. Loud, indifferent, alive. The city did not care about my pain. The city did not care about my revenge. It only cared about what came next. And what came next was mine to decide. Let me tell you what nobody tells you about revenge. They show you the moment of triumph, the look on the betrayer's face, the satisfaction of watching someone finally understand the consequence of what they did. And yes, that moment existed. It was real. It sat in my chest like a warm coal for exactly 3 days. But what nobody shows you is what comes after the coal cools. I spent 2 weeks in my new apartment in near total silence. I worked remotely. I cooked simple meals. I walked to the market in the mornings and bought tomatoes and onions and stood in the noise of ordinary life. And I thought about who I was now. I was 31 years old. I had spent my prime working years building a life for people who had hollowed me out from the inside. I had sent every naira of my labor to fund a deception. I had loved so hard that I had forgotten to love myself. And now I had burned it all to ash and walked out of the smoke. Johnson and Anita found temporary accommodation at a cousin's one-room apartment. The shop, without the back-end account access I had severed, struggled. Without the flow of my invisible financial support, things fell apart faster than even I had expected. Johnson, it turned out, had never actually been running a business. He had been running a performance of one, funded entirely by my remittances. My family continued to call. My mother, my uncle, my father's sister. They said I had gone too far. They said I had left a child homeless. They said, "What will people say?" What will people say? I had sacrificed 3 years of my life on the altar of what people would say. What people would say if I didn't support my husband. What people would say if I didn't forgive my sister. What people would say if I chose myself over family. I was done. Every call that came in, I looked at the name and I set it aside, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. I had learned, slowly and painfully, that the people who asked me to forgive were not the people who bled. They had not worked the double shifts. They had not lain awake on a foreign bed wondering why Johnson sounded distracted on the phone. They had not come home to find their life replaced. They asked me to carry pain they would never touch. So I set the calls aside. I filed for divorce. My lawyer made it clean and swift. There was enough documentation of financial misconduct to make things straightforward. Johnson did not contest. I think by then he understood. 3 months after I walked out of that empty house, I received a job offer from a healthcare firm in Lagos, senior care coordinator. Double the salary I had earned abroad, with the option to work hybrid. I accepted. I found a proper apartment, 2 bedrooms, a balcony that caught the evening breeze off the Lagos mainland, and a kitchen with good light. I furnished it slowly, piece by piece, with things I chose entirely for myself, not for a household, not for a husband, for me. I am not going to tell you I do not think about them. I think about the baby sometimes, Chukwuemeke, with his father's eyes and his mother's forehead. That child is innocent. He deserved none of this. I hope someone who loves him takes proper care of him. I think about my mother, who I have not spoken to in 4 months. I think about what it cost her to choose silence over her daughter for so many years, choosing peace, choosing the appearance of family unity over the truth of what was being done to me. I think about Anita and what drove her, the hunger, the jealousy, the decade of feeling like she was always almost enough. I do not excuse it, but I understand that broken people break things, and I was the thing she broke. And I think about Johnson, how a man can look at a woman who is sacrificing everything for him and feel nothing, just calculation, just strategy. I wonder what he feels now, sleeping in a cousin's parlor. I wonder if he thinks about the voice notes he sent me. Thank you, baby. I'm proud of you. I wonder if shame visits him at night the way grief visited me. I do not hate any of them. Hate is too heavy, and I have already carried enough. So, what I want to leave you with is this. There is a version of this story where I stayed, where I accepted the begging, the tears, the family pressure, the "she is your blood, let it go," where I swallowed it down and rebuilt a life on the same rotten foundation and spent the rest of my years half alive, making peace with what was done to me. Many women live that version. They live it because they are told endurance is virtue, that a woman who fights for herself is difficult, that family, no matter how it wounds you, must be chosen over yourself. I refuse that story. This, the empty house, the severed accounts, the unanswered calls, the new apartment with the evening breeze, is what it looks like when a woman finally, at enormous cost, decides that she is worth fighting for. It is not comfortable. It is not praised. It is not the version people will cheer for at your family reunion, but it is yours. If you are reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, in the exhaustion, in the quiet suspicion, in the weight of carrying people who are not carrying you back, let me tell you something, woman to woman, person to person. You are allowed to choose yourself. Not after you've given enough, not after you've proved you tried, not after one more year of hoping they will change. Now, you are allowed to choose yourself now. My name is Vera. I came back from abroad. I found my sister in my bed, and I left them both with exactly what they deserved.